Zaeus is just sat next to me, the consultant's at his desk, and he's calling through. He's like, I've got a 5-year-old boy here who's got papilledema. He needs to get put in for an MRI. And as we were waiting for the MRI, he's playing and he's turned around to me and he goes, out of nowhere, he goes, I'm gonna die. I got my first phone call from the school and they said, Zaeus has vomited, can you come and pick him up? He didn't seem unwell when I picked him up. I didn't really understand what was going on. He just complained that he had a bit of a headache. And I'd be like, okay, we'll just keep an eye on it. Again, you just give him medicine like kids do. He's just started school. He could have picked up on a bug. I know what my son's like when he's ill. So I was like, well, you haven't come down with anything because your symptoms are usually a bit different. He went back to school and then the following week, I got another phone call saying he's vomited again. Same thing, seemed like himself, everything was bubbly. And then after that, he started to complain probably for about a week or two of having headaches and he just started vomiting everywhere. I rushed him to A&E because he went really limp and I'm saying to them, look, like he's not even responding properly to his name. And I'm explaining to the doctors all of these symptoms about him being sick, him having the headaches. Is there something going on with his head, with his brain? Like what is going on? And they were like, we're just going to give you anti-sickness tablets. And I'm saying, well, this isn't good enough. Where do I go as a mom from this point? He's still having headaches, still vomiting, still trying to get GP appointments, couldn't get any. You'd be speaking to him and he'd just like be zoning out and then he'd come back and be like, yeah. And his balance was starting to just go off a little bit. If you saw it from an outsider's perspective, you would think he was just a child that was in his own head. It wasn't something that was very alarming, but you would have just thought he's just not paying attention. Every time I'd pick him up, I'd say, you know, how's he been today? Has he been complaining about his head? Like I've noticed that he's been tripping up and doing stuff like that. And I was getting accident reports from his school every single day. And then his headache started to get worse. He was having a headache every single day. He'd almost become like a baby again. Still not getting anywhere with the doctors, haven't got anywhere with the hospital. Like I tried every avenue I could have possibly thought of. And I thought maybe it's his eyes. Like maybe he's just struggling to see. I don't know if it's genetic, but I've struggled with my eyesight. If he's struggling with his eyes, then this could be why he's having headaches. I booked him an appointment and I've told them everything. They couldn't get a picture of the back of my son's eyes. So she said, it looks like he is struggling with his eyesight. He seems like long-sighted, but because of everything you've told me, I'm going to get him an emergency appointment to the eye hospital. We've got to the appointment and they've done all the initial eye tests. You know, can you see this? What does this say? What colour's this? They then sent him down to do the picture of the back of the eyes because they hadn't had one on file because the opticians wasn't able to send one. They got a video and then they sent us back upstairs to the consultant. Zaeus is just sat next to me, the consultant's at his desk, and he's calling through, literally like immediately calling through people. He's like, I've got a 5-year-old boy here who's got papilledema. He needs to get put in for an MRI. As he's ringing them, I'm Googling papilledema, not even knowing how to spell it. When he's finally got off the phone, I'm saying to him, you know, what's going on? And he's like, well, your son's got papilledema, which means he's got swelling of the optic nerves. Worst case scenario, he might have a brain tumor. I cannot let you leave this hospital until we know what is causing the back of his eyes to swell. So from that moment, I'm now thinking the worst. That was not something that had ever in a million years crossed my mind. That's what makes it so scary. All these consultants and doctors are coming and they're saying, you know, can you talk us through the symptoms? And we took him in for the MRI. We went back into like the ward that we were on. Doctor came in and I remember I was sat down on the bed. My son was playing with like these dinosaurs that were in the room. He said to me, your son has a tumor. I remember looking at him and he looked at me, and then the way that he looked at me, I remember thinking, okay, yeah, this is bad. Because he was like, we're going to run some more tests, or we're going to get all the x-ray, the MRI imaging, and I need to send them over to the children's hospital because we need to know what we're going to do with this. And he left the room and I looked at Zaeus and I just burst out into tears. How am I ever going to explain that to him? And I've called his dad and I've called his auntie, so his dad's sister, and I'm like, you guys need to come to the hospital now. Half an hour later, his dad and his sister have come to the hospital. They've sat us in a room and they've sat us down and they've gone into detail. He's got a very large tumor at the side of his brain. We need to take him to Birmingham Children's Hospital and get him blue lighted there because they may need to do surgery today, like tonight. It felt like something took over my body. It was literally like this feeling of despair and dread had just taken over me, and I got up and I was like, I'm so sorry. And they were like, why are you apologizing? You've just been told the worst thing a parent can be told. Then I'm just trying to get mom head on and logical head on of like, okay, put your emotions to the side for a second, because you need to store as much information as possible so that you know what's happening and what needs to happen next. The consultant showed me a picture of the tumor. It was huge. And then I went back in the room with Zaeus and I'm like, oh Zay, you know, we're going in an ambulance. And he's just happy to be going in an ambulance. Like, he's like, to him it's bright lights. I remember looking at him and I thought to myself, this doesn't make sense. I've just seen a picture of this ginormous tumor in your head, but the child that I'm seeing in front of me, like, it's hard for me to put two and two together that this is what is going on inside of you. We've got to the Children's Hospital, and then the next day they've put him in for another MRI scan. And as we were waiting for the MRI, and he's playing, and he's turned around to me and he goes, out of nowhere, he goes, I'm gonna die. Just literally just continue playing with his cars, like with his toys. And I remember I looked at the nurse and she looked at me and we just had this, like, we exchanged, it was like a look of like dread. He's gone in for the MRI, come back out, we've got a better image of the tumor now. They said we need to act fast because at this point, give it 72 hours and you might, like, your son might not be here. That day, that Wednesday, he's just playing, you know, his little cousins have come over. I've kind of let people know that he's in the hospital and what's going on. When I let him eat whatever he wanted that day, I didn't know that that was gonna be the last food he was ever gonna eat. So, like, I'm just thinking, at the time, eat as much as you want, you've got surgery tomorrow. And then when I realized now that he never ate again, next morning he's gone into surgery. I'm pacing back and forth. He came out and obviously he was still very kind of like groggy from the anesthetic, and you know, he wasn't really, he was responsive kind of, like he'd say words, but he was very like just very grumpy. A couple hours later, he's saying, Mommy, my head hurts. So I've said to the doctors, I'm like, I think something's wrong. He keeps on saying that his head's hurting, but he's pointing at the exact same place that the EDV should have essentially like stopped the symptoms of. They were like, don't worry, there's all these doctors, like, we're here. I've gone to sleep on the chair next to him, and at 4 a.m, I woke up and there was like this, like the nurse was like checking him, but I could see the way that she was checking him. It was almost like something was wrong. So I've kind of immediately got up and I'm like, what's going on? And she said, his eyes don't look responsive. They'd looked in his eyes and like one of his pupils were huge and the other pupil was like tiny. They were like, okay, we need to call the neurosurgeons now. And all I remember, within about 10 minutes of them making that call, there was about 5 neurosurgeons, there was people from the intensive care unit. I remember seeing somebody run into the room with this big red bag, and all that kept going through my mind is, okay, like, something is really, really wrong here. So I'm just kind of like sitting there and all these staff are around him trying to figure out what's going on. They're using all these medical terms. I'm trying to stay calm to hear what they're saying, but then I'm also a human, so I'm then trying to like process what's going on, and I just got sent into a state of shock. And I literally just completely started hyperventilating, where they had to put me in another room, calm me down, and I'm just in absolute hysterics. They've rushed him down for a CT scan. The neurosurgeon who I'd been kind of speaking to and had been operating on him came and sat me in a room, and he said, I need you to fill out these forms. And he said, if I'm going to be 100% honest with you, because I think you deserve honesty, I am nervous. He said, I'm going to do everything that I can possibly do to get your son off this table, but I cannot promise you that he's going to get off this table. And if he does get off this table, then he's not going to be the child that you once had. But right now, all I care about is making sure that he comes out of this alive. They've rushed him into theatre to get like the anaesthetic, and just as he was about to go under the anaesthetic, like, they let me be with him, and I literally cried over his body. And I was like, I don't care what we have to do right now, you cannot leave me right now. And he went in, and then like his dad and his aunt came to just try and give like a little bit of support. Maybe 6-7 hours later, the doctors came. They moved him into intensive care. In that moment, I remember looking at him and I felt like I had the baby back that I had, because he was just laid in this bed helpless. We took him for the MRI and they saw that he had damage on his brainstem. He's still able to breathe by himself, but they didn't want to take the ventilator out because they didn't want his brain to do too much work. His eyes would open. You'd see him kind of look from side to side to try and like follow like your movements. Within a few days, he then developed dystonia, which is when things kind of took a bit more of a turn. It got to the point where I'm just seeing in his eyes, he is in pain. We got part of the biopsy results back, and they've sat me down and they've basically said, you know, we haven't got the full results back, but what we do know is that we have 2 issues here. The first issue is the tumor. The second issue that we've got is the brainstem damage. Even if he didn't have the tumor, he would be completely incapable of doing anything for himself ever again in his life. And I looked at his dad. I remember he looked at me, and he's Christian, and he basically said, my God is stronger than all of these doctors. And I said, look, this is where we are, and this is the situation. And right now, we've all been praying to make this situation better, but this is what it is. And then he turned around to me and he goes, it seems like you have a better relationship with the doctors anyway, so do whatever you want. And I was saying to him, I was like, please don't put this on me. Please don't make me be the one to have to carry this. And he walked out. I was then the one who had to kind of carry the weight of making that choice. How have I ended up here? 3 weeks ago, he was at school. 3 weeks later, I'm laid in bed next to him writing out his story to get help with his funeral. That night I went to sleep. I got a phone call and it was the hospital. And they were like, Zaeus's heart rate is going down. You need to come in now. I've like ran. And I remember I just looked at him and I thought, you're ready to go. They've took out his ventilator. And I remember crying. I remember I looked at him and he just had this tear, this one tear go to like, it was like the side, it just thinged at the side of his face. When his heart stopped, the sun shone so bright and I just felt this overwhelming feeling of peace. It's a feeling that I can't really put into words. We had his funeral, which was the most beautiful day. It just felt like such an honoring and like just such a significant and symbolic day. Like it's only his body that went, because Zay has carried me through this more than anybody will ever understand. Feel everything that you have to feel, and everything that you have to feel is completely valid. Let yourself go through it. When you can't swim, float. When you stop trying to actively swim and you surrender and you let yourself be, life will carry you through until you have the strength to swim again.